So like not all men are on the point of, I'm going to sit down and journal, right?
Yeah,
That's
totally.
not,
Honestly, that was something new for me. Like that's
yeah,
not something that came natural to me either. And like, oh gosh, I have to figure out like what my emotions say.
yeah,
Like I'm not game for that. I'm not here for that. But
yeah,
like the more that I'm like, no, I'm just writing. Like
yep,
I'm not getting in touch with my emotional side. I'm just writing,
yeah.
some of my thoughts.
Welcome back to the Men of Iron podcast. This month, we're talking about churches and men and why they are so important to the church. Today, we have Kevin with us.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So just to kind of get us started, tell us a little bit about yourself, what you currently do, family, kids, what that looks like.
Yeah. So for me, I've been married for almost 15 years. It'll be 15 years in the spring to Joanna, who's my wife. We have two kids, a son who's 9 and a daughter that's 4. We both work at LCBC Church. So we've made that our home. That's been our church home for about 12 years now. And I just celebrated 10 years on staff on Sunday. So that's kind of what I do. I work there on our digital team. I started on our production team there, and talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. But as far as what we do, like we're both from Waynesboro, Pennsylvania, which is like South Central PA, close to Gettysburg, Chambersburg area, about 20 minutes away from the Maryland border there, South Central. We grew up there together. I met my wife in high school there, and man, we've had a journey. Gone to the Midwest for college together. Came back to Pennsylvania and found LCBC Church at that point in time, and have been there ever since. And I've been called on staff, and so has she after me. And it's been just a great place to raise a family in, and to start to have a career, and to have a ministry there. So.
That's super cool. And we kind of got connected. You were starting something down in Lancaster City at the campus there. So we were talking through, a couple different resources that we have, and you kind of landed on a man's game plan.
Yeah.
So kind of how did you get to that point of like man's game plan, and taking it to LCBC City?
Honestly, Andy, who's our Next Steps staff person at our city campus, that's the campus that me and my wife have been attending for a couple of years now, since I stepped out of a role that was a weekend role at our Manheim campus. But they're just wanting to get connected with more men. Was like, hey, I want to join the men's group. And really, Andy was like, hey, I'd love for you to help me lead some of this. And I was like, oh, that's great. Yeah. So we did one semester in the winter, and then in the time between that and our spring semester, he's like, hey, let's get together and start talking through what content we can do. So really sifting through a bunch of things. And I've been familiar with Men of Iron. Just honestly, it was funny. I work part-time for a production company called Stray, and have done a lot of fundraisers at Spooky Nook with Men of Iron. And I'm like, hey, we should check out what content they would have. So looking through different things, landed on a man's game plan. I was like, hey, we should do this one. This one looks pretty good as far as the content that covers lots of different things, lots of different next steps, and good foundational principles to go after. So we started to do that, and then quickly found out you guys had a new version of that. So you guys are so gracious to us to get us the resources that we need, gets the books that we need and stuff in time for launching a couple of weeks ago, right as you guys were launching that new content too. So we were super grateful for that, and it's been really good the last couple of weeks. We've doubled the amount of men that have come out just from, honestly, boots on the ground initiative in our weekend services. Like, hey, no, we've got let's have 5 guys stand out there and just start talking with people. I'm like, hey, you really need to join this group. So it's been really cool to see that growth. And I'm really excited to see how it continues to go in the next couple of weeks. So
that's really cool. And talking about just men in general at LCBC City, you're talking about the group growing and all these different pieces. What makes up your men's ministry, and why do you see it being so important for the church in general?
So for us, it's the target audience we're looking for at our church to know that it's healthy are young families. And that starts with the man. He's the leader, the spiritual leader of his home. And to be able to connect with them and get them in a path where they're thinking through that. Like some of those guys going in there, they probably don't really believe that they're the spiritual leader of their home. Really, I would say that a lot of times you look at a church and your women's ministry could be really flourishing because they naturally want to connect with each other. Men aren't the same way.
Yeah.
They don't naturally tend towards connection.
Yep.
In that way. But if you can give them a little bit of something of value, like they're much more available to give it a shot. So we've just found that hey, like one of the things that we did to canvas people, like, hey, I know you like football. Like, I know that you're watching football most Sundays after church. I was like, why don't we just do fantasy football? Like, just get them in. And it's like, oh yeah. And also, like, if you like this, like, you should also just like come on a Tuesday night. Like give up a Tuesday night for a couple hours, come and hang out and see who are these guys you're competing with in fantasy football,
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
just trying to find anything to find that common ground, to get them to a point where they can trust you and they know you, like, oh yeah, that's that guy from church. Like, yeah, I'm going to go hang out with him for a couple hours and then just get to know more of the guys coming in. So that's been one of the things that we've been trying to emphasize. It's just like, hey, find that common ground, find that thing that connects you and get them to join. So
I think it's so cool, like that thought process in that of just like meeting guys where they're at, right? Because sometimes we might have this big picture, we want to do this crazy thing, and we have this big picture of men's ministry. Yeah. But let's start with fantasy football.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
I'm in for some fantasy football.
Yeah, I mean, totally, right? Like, oh, hey, like the first night we were like, hey, like, we're just going to have some pizzas and like, we're going to get to know each other and just going to talk and like hang out and maybe we'll throw, a baseball game up there, playoffs started. So like, just come, like, it's going to be a good time. I promise you. So,
and when we were talking, you were saying a little bit about like the importance of guys knowing that they're spiritual leaders, but also creating that connection at the church. What do you see like when guys actually get involved, right? They get a part of a men's ministry, they start to get, taught properly that they are leaders. What do you see come out of that? Is it that you see stronger families? Is it that, what do you see come through? Yeah.
I mean, you start to see the guy take bringing their family to church as their responsibility. And that alone, like, that will change your family. That'll change so much for the generations that will come from their sons and their daughters, to know that their dad took time to know who God is and to lead them to that spot. So
that's so good. And for yourself, not to get real personal, but like, what do you do on a regular basis to stay connected in that thought of like, you're a spiritual leader, you're leading your family. Not only do you lead your family, but now at LCBC, you're there on the team there, kind of making an impact through all your campuses. So like, what does that look like on yourself, for yourself, to continue that faith journey and, be that leader?
Yeah. So that starts with like making sure that your relationship with Jesus is good. So for me, like, that'll be, whether it's in the middle of my run in the morning, or if it's in the middle of, just taking some time, like sitting down on my couch in the morning before my kids get up, like, it could be digging into a devotional. It could be digging into, like, I've done like Bible reading plans and stuff, but like the value point of me is just sitting almost like in solitude and asking the questions. Journaling's really big for me because it helps me. Like, I'm not always great verbally, like in the moment. Like, I'm not always great talking with people. I would say I'm more of an introverted type of person. But like, for me, what allows me to get my thoughts out is actually writing it down. And God sees that, that's the same form of talking with God as it is to sit there and talk in a way that you're praying out loud. And for me, that's my ways of kind of jotting down what's in my head, what's my thoughts, what are my desires, and asking God, hey, come search me, help show me, one, my purpose, show me where you're leading me, because for me, like, I want to know how to become more of where he wants me to be. And then lastly, like, show me how I can show up for others today. So That's my foundation to start my day, start my weeks, getting into a spot where then I can help either lead others in the team capacity that I'm in, or go to men's group and to help have good conversations. So
yeah, that's really good. And I think like pieces of that are sometimes tough to get started.
Yeah.
Right. So like not all men are on the point of, I'm going to sit down and journal. Right.
Yeah,
That's
totally.
not...
Honestly, that was something new for me. Like that's
Yeah.
not something that came natural to me either. And like, oh gosh, I have to figure out like what my emotions say. Like,
Yeah.
like I'm not game for that. I'm not here for that. But
Yeah.
like the more that I'm like, no, I'm just writing. Like
Yep.
I'm not getting in touch with my emotional side. I'm just writing,
Yeah.
some of my thoughts. Cause honestly, I'll just forget them if I don't.
Yeah.
Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying this episode of the Men of Iron podcast. Discipline Restored is a free 30-day men's devotional designed to reignite spiritual disciplines in your life. It will give you simple and practical instruction on scripture reading, journaling, prayer, solitude, and more. This men's daily devotional online will help establish the foundational blocks of your faith journey. When registered, you'll receive daily emails every morning for 30 days that will have an audio file and a transcript plus a challenge for the day. The Devo will challenge you with things like journaling, prayer, scripture memorization, all with intent on helping to establish disciplines and rhythms in every man's life. Get started today.
What do you think is so important for like guys trying to start out, right? Because we talk about we're trying to get them at fantasy football,
Yep.
right? And then we're trying to get them involved in the men's ministry. What are some like simple practical steps that you would give guys to be like, hey, this is a good starting point to help that walk? You're talking about your walk right there, and it's amazing.
Yeah.
Like all those different pieces kind of go hand in hand and play their own separate role.
Yeah.
So like, what would you say for like guys, where should they start to begin those practical habits and steps into continuing their walk?
Oh man, the first thing that I would do is just like have a Bible, have a Bible and open it up, go on to YouVersion and just like download YouVersion and just like pick a plan, pick something that you might want to resonate with, like whether or not that you're feeling tension at work, whether you're feeling, stressed out, whatever that thing is you feel right now that you're missing, like God has something to say about that. So search YouVersion for that. Like there's plenty of plans on there that'll point you in the right direction. And like, don't start out with the 2-month plan, like do the 7-day plan, man. Like get a small win, go in there and be like, hey, I can do this for 7 days. That's something I can commit to right now. Is I can commit to 7 days. I'm going to open my Bible and I'm going to read this devotion and what they say about this thing that I'm having trouble with right now. Yeah. So
man, that's good. I think something that I always loved is, you ever see the movie The Patriot?
Yeah.
Yeah. Great movie. I think it's top 5 on my list, but something that they always said in that book, in that movie, was aim small, miss small.
Oh yeah.
And I think that line right there for men is something that we should keep in our pockets at all times when we're in this spiritual walk, right? Because if I'm aiming very small, it's hard to miss.
Yeah.
So starting with a small little thing can grow to something big, and you're going to hit your target.
Yeah.
Right? You're going to hit your target. And so whether it be hopping on that or, just opening the Bible, let's be simple with it.
Yep.
Like open up the book and see what's in there and see what you can find. And also just giving different resources to allow you. And that's kind of like a man's game plan, setting that foundation for some of those, right? Like giving those simple pieces of what you should be doing in your faith, in your fitness, finances, like all those things.
Yep.
Like they're so important. And I think for guys, it can be a big task to get their arms around and create little simple steps for that.
Yeah.
It's so good.
What I find that was so good with Man's Game Plan and the new content is like just the practical next steps to dig into. Like, hey, great. Like we watched the content from it and we got the understanding of what we're trying to get to, but it's your actions in the weeks coming forward. Like, what are you going to do about that? That's the thing that's going to start changing trajectories for guys in our ministries, that we're going to give them small applications of what that looks like. And because of that, they're going to start to have a better understanding what it looks to grasp those areas and be fully confident in those things for them. So,
yeah, that's one of my favorite parts about our kind of like those resource pages, is just making SMART goals. That's simple in business, and that can be even in your walk up, just making those SMART goals. And I think something that I've always loved, even out of the whole way through SMART, it has all the acronyms, but I think it's the first one for me is just making it specific.
Oh yeah.
Sometimes we can make this broad. Well, I just want to have a good faith, right? But be specific in what you want. I think sometimes as guys, we sometimes want to take on this big masterful plan, but it's just being specific in the little thing that I want and make it measurable.
Make it measurable. Know how to win.
Yeah.
Like if you don't know how to win, then you don't know how you're doing.
Yeah.
And put a time limit on it.
Yeah.
Like you can't just keep doing it forever. Like if you're going to set the goal and make the measure, like do it by time.
Yeah.
And get it done. So.
Yeah. I love that. And it also creates accountability. Like I think for guys, sometimes like we have this ambitious plan to go after, right? But also making it have a time bound to it, but also it like keeps me accountable.
Yeah.
Like we need accountability as guys. I mean, some of us may say we don't, or we can do it ourselves, but to have someone say, hey, like you need to stay on this, or hey, like, did you get to your goal? You said you're going to do this SMART goal. Were you able to hit it? And I think as a leader, like that's where we come in as a big play, right? To be able to keep these guys accountable in our men's ministry to help them grow their faith.
Yeah. And that's just asking questions, you know, that's really coming in and be like, hey man, how'd you do? Like how'd that last week go? Like what were some things that you took or like did that helped you? Yeah. Like just asking those questions and like not being afraid to ask those questions. Yeah. Because you're hoping someone's asking you those questions too, because like you want to be held accountable, whether or not you say like you want to do it yourself. I mean, I know times that I've tried to do it myself and that's not always been great. You know, I either burn bridges with other people or relationships or, you know, I quite often am the ones like, well, why can't you ever ask for help? It's like, well, you know what, you know, that's just my pride, honestly, getting in the way. And like accountability, you know, if you can start to shed that light of like, hey, you don't have to do this by yourself, like, and remove the pride aspect of that, like you can start to make relational equity with those people. So whether it's other guys in men's group, whether it's your family, whether it's you know, relationships with people at work, like those, being accountable in a way that's gracious is really a good way to continue to gain that relational equity. So.
That's good. And thinking like that thought of, you know, being a men's leader, right? And we talked about how it can affect a lot. I mean, you've been at LCBC for a little bit of time now. Like, what do you see like in just with being, I mean, we talked about men specific, but across LCBC, like how you guys pour into men, because we see it time to time with your groups, next step groups, those things. Like, where do you see it actually play out? You have a couple campuses now. You're not just here in Manheim anymore. So like that trickle effect of raising up men, making them accountable. How's that trickling out through, you know, LCBC?
Ah, man. So like a lot of times we feel like like what LCBC does so well is we go into different pockets of Pennsylvania and like try and impact the communities that they're in. So whether or not we have lots of campuses, we are really looking at, like specifically at Lancaster City, like we're looking at the men there and like, how do we continue to connect? And really, how do we continue to find other people in those communities to be able to come in, whether it's even coming into the men's community or even just coming on the weekend. It's like, no, there's people still in those communities that are far from God that like even just trying to get them in the door is helpful. So a big part of that is like not only staying within our little bubble, but like going into our communities and serving. So like even in the end of our men's like 5-week group with a man's game plan, like we have a mission to go into a place called Benchmark in the city, which is a place that you know, we can do workouts and like they offer like exercise space for kids that basically don't have good influences in their life, places where they can go after school and not, you know, go home alone where their parents might still be working, or, you know, they might be in a single parent household. But you can go in and you can volunteer there, and you can go and just like, hey, we're going to like hit a workout today. And like, you can get to know some of the kids that would be a part of those programs. And like those are the people that we're trying to reach and to guide into a men's ministries, like just trying to get in those communities and impact them in that way, whether or not it's an older guy or if it's, you know, a young man. Like we just want to get into our community and know how to serve well. And as a man, like that's like a perfect, like, man, you're going to go hit some weights with some young men. Like just go do that. Just and start talking with them and start building a relationship in that way. Like that's how you start growing a men's ministry.
And with like that thought of taking men and getting them in the community. You know, we talk about discipleship, we talk about these things, but how do you, I mean, I know you said that program, going to that, getting the kids working out and that kind of stuff. How do you get how do you get guys really out in the community? Like, that's the next step, right? Like, let's get out of our four walls. Like, how do we start impacting Lancaster City? We're taught so well in the four walls. Now let's go impact men in our communities and, you know, who we come in contact with. How do you continue to create that ripple effect with men's ministry?
I mean, that's vision. That vision comes from the top of our leadership at our church. I mean, we have fundamental engagements that we want to go after to help you stay connected, to help you stay, you know, in service. But like, one of the bigger things is like, get out in your communities. If you're not getting out in the communities, you can't do the one mission that our church has. And that mission is to introduce people to Jesus and together fully follow him. And like, you can't do that if you're sitting inside, you know. You got to get out in your communities and you got to meet new people.
Yep.
So,
man, that's good. Just kind of to wrap this thought up of just men's leadership, is there anything that you think, like, if you were sitting in a room with guys right now, what would you tell them that may be struggling, maybe going through it, of just like to continue on, just that thought of like why it's so important for your faith walk to be involved in men's ministry and be involved in your community as a man?
You got to surround yourself with people that are going to lift you up and they're going to hold you accountable when you need to. And that's like, some of those relationships you don't have in your own family. Like, you've got to go out and make those connections. And that's something I've learned in the past couple of years. Like, that was something that I was feeling I was lacking. And that's why I was like, hey, I'm going to start going to this men's group, you know, with Andy. And what that's turned into is forming, you know, relationships with some of those guys at the campuses. And like, I like, there's so many high fives going around, you know, on the weekend now when I see them, and so many ways to celebrate them, as, you know, as some of those guys start to make decisions to get baptized and to do those things. And like, to be able to rally around those guys and be like, dude, like, this is it. This is like what it means to walk together in this journey. Like you don't get to experience that if you're just sitting on the sideline. So,
man, that gets me fired up.
Yeah.
I think it's so important that we just keep each other, you know, accountable, but also celebrate wins.
Yeah.
You know, aim in small, miss small. Like, we take all these pieces that we talked about, and like, they're all little intricate pieces, but they all play into a big picture of why men are so important in church and why men are so important in community. And just really, I just want to say thank you to you.
Oh, no, thank you
for coming in and being a part of the podcast, because I think like hearing different leadership stories is so important, because guys need other men.
Yeah.
Like, we do. We need each other at the end of the day.
You every day you probably walk in, you're like, nah, I don't need that, but you do.
Yeah. And that's so good to be able to shine a light on that and why it's so important. So thank you. And just thank you for your leadership for this area down here in Lancaster, because it's affecting the community that we're in. And here for us at Men of Iron, like, guys like you stepping up and taking really a big part in what, you know, God has called us to do, and making men spiritual leaders is a huge thing, and we don't take it lightly. So just thank you for that.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's like, it's what God's calling me at this moment to do. So
awesome. Well, thank you for joining us for this episode of the Men of Iron podcast, where we talked about church leaders and how men are so important in our communities and in our churches. See you guys next week.
Thanks for listening to the Men of Iron podcast. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share. At Men of Iron, we exist to change a culture one man at a time, and we'd love to have you partner with us. So go to menofiron.org to see how you can get involved, or donate at menofiron.org/donate.